old woman named Helga has dementia and loves knitting while peacefully watching TV, but a noise coming from the vent startles her. She then calls the exterminator. He asks about her name and address. Having dementia, Helga reads them off pieces of paper. Shortly after, the exterminator, Frank, arrives. Approaching Helga's apartment, Frank notices a smelly liquid coming from the vent and hears a noise. After Frank knocks on her door, Helga opens it but forgets she even called Frank and that there was a noise. Frank hears the noise and Helga lets him in. Frank checks it out and finds a blood trail. Frank tracks it to find a fellow exterminator bleeding inside the vent. Hearing a slight noise, Frank turns around and then screams as something lunges at him. Helga hears Frank scream and then sees him crawling out only to get pulled back in. Having dementia, Helga forgets about what she's just seen and goes back to knitting and watching TV while poor Frank is dragged to the vent. Again, Helga hears a noise and calls another exterminator.
Yeah, that's probably rats, man. I can take care of that for you.
4 days earlier, a ball of fire is shot from outer space to Earth. It ends up in New York, breaks through a storeroom window, and lands inside a toy house. It's an egg from which a small spider hatches out. Shortly after, Helga's granddaughter, Charlotte, sneaks inside the storeroom to steal a doll and post about it on her Instagram. Just then, she finds the spider on the back of her hand. Hearing someone coming, Charlotte empties her matchbox, hides the spider in it, and leaves through the vent. Gunther, Helga's sister, checks the room to see if someone is there. Seeing the hole in her window, Gunther freaks out and rushes out of the room. Charlotte crawls her way back through the vent. She peers through to find Gunther telling off her stepfather, Ethan. She accuses Charlotte of breaking into the storeroom. Angry, Ethan decides to confront his stepdaughter. Before her stepfather notices her absence, Charlotte rushes to her room and hides the spider in a jar.
There's no way Charlotte could have done that.
Ethan walks in and asks Charlotte if she was in Gunther's apartment. Charlotte lies and says no. The two aren't getting along well. Ethan tells her to just stay away from Gunther, but gets interrupted when Sandy from the publishing house calls him about the comic book he's working on. Charlotte takes a picture of the spider, calls him Sting, and posts his picture on Instagram. Just then, her mother Heather has her watch Liam, her half-brother from Ethan, while she goes to her desk to do some work. With her mother gone, Charlotte gets bored and tends to her spider. Aside from being a comic book artist, Ethan also works part-time as the building supervisor to make ends meet. As he fixes the pipes in a neighbor's apartment, a cockroach lands on his face, freaking him out. After Ethan gets it done, the apartment owner, Maria, comes to tell him good job. She's a widow who also lost her 2 sons. She tells Ethan to be grateful for having his family around him, while Charlotte feeds a cockroach to Sting. Ethan fixes the heater in the basement and takes out the garbage. After a day's work, Ethan comes back to tend to his baby son, Liam, while Heather goes to check on her mother, Helga, who watches TV with her aunt Gunther. As Heather tucks her mother in, Helga tells Heather she made Charlotte a moth sweater. Having dementia, Helga then tells Heather, her daughter, that she should meet her daughter before she drifts to sleep. Ethan is busy working on his new comic book. He also does his best to bond with his stepdaughter and have her look at a character he's just drawn. It's a professor based on Charlotte's father. The two have a moment looking at it, but Heather interrupts them, has Charlotte prepare the dinner table, and thanks Ethan for being so loving to Charlotte. Shortly after, Ethan goes to Charlotte's room to tuck her in, but she's not there. He sees a sketch of a giant spider and the jar where Sting is. Before he can spot Sting, Charlotte interrupts him. Ethan tucks her in and tells her goodnight. While Charlotte is deep asleep, Sting silently opens the jar and sneaks to the vent. Gunther's parrot spots Sting coming from the vent and tries alerting the sleeping Gunther. The next morning, the family has breakfast. Charlotte tries talking to Ethan and her mother, but they are not listening, as they are super busy talking about work and responsibilities. Frustrated, Charlotte storms off. Ethan asks Heather when she's going to tell Charlotte that her father has been back in town for 6 months. He has never stopped by to see his daughter. Heather assures Ethan she'll tell Charlotte when the time comes. She also tells Ethan to tend to their son Liam before she tends to her work. Shortly after, the family carries on the daily routine and everybody tends to their work. Just then, Gunther's scream is heard from the upper floor. Ethan checks on her to find her parrot killed, skinned, and pinned to the cage. Gunter has Ethan call Frank the exterminator. Frank arrives to investigate the scene. He thinks that whatever killed the parrot is small and came through the vent. That's why he decides to smoke the whole building to kill whatever killed the parrot.
I'm gonna exterminate its ass.
Meanwhile, Charlotte brings Sting a bag full of cockroaches to feed him. She whistles for him, and Sting mimics her whistle, meaning that he's hungry. A mothball accidentally rolls towards the jar. Sting freaks out, but calms down when Charlotte takes the mothball away. It turns out the mothball can melt Sting's web. That's why Mothball is Sting's worst enemy. Sting has also grown bigger in size, which Charlotte finds cool. After Frank sprays the whole building, he sprays Ethan's apartment. Just as he's about to spray Charlotte's room, she tells him not to do it. She doesn't want the pesticide to hurt her spider. Frank advises her to get a dog and ditch the spider. All spiders know is eat and kill. Later that night, Maria dozes off watching TV. Her dog senses something in the vent and starts barking loudly, rousing the drunk Maria from her sleep. Cranky, Maria kicks out her dog and goes to take her medicine. Totally unaware Sting is sneaking up on her, Maria takes a look at her picture with her late husband and 2 sons. Just as Maria gets emotional, Sting lunges at her and stings her in the cheek, causing her to fall and hit the back of her head hard. Maria rushes to the bathroom to check her face and notices her cheek swelling and turning purple. She vomits before collapsing and hitting the back of her head on the edge of the bathtub. Maria can't move anything except for her eyeballs. Sting goes into her mouth to finish her off. With Sting getting bigger, Charlotte visits Eric to borrow a fish tank. He's a biology student who experiments on animals in his apartment. Charlotte has Eric take a look at Sting. As Charlotte whistles for him, Sting mimics her whistle. Astonished, Eric says this is not a spider, as spiders don't have vocal cords. Charlotte tells him it's not an ordinary spider and feeds Sting a cockroach, which Eric finds cool. Charlotte then shows him how big Sting is. Eric asks Charlotte to leave Sting with him until he finds a safe tank. He needs to make sure Sting won't break out. Charlotte agrees and tells Eric to make sure Ethan won't find out about their deal.
I will let you out of my tanks, no charge.
Meanwhile, Heather and Ethan are arguing, but a noise from inside the vent interrupts them. Ethan checks it out, but is startled when something rushes toward him, causing him to fall flat on the ground. It's just Maria's dog. To return the dog, Ethan knocks on Maria's door, but no one answers. So Ethan unlocks the door with the skeleton key and walks in to find Maria's body. He calls the police and tells them about the incident. As Ethan answers a few questions for the cop, a call from Eric interrupts him, asking for his immediate attention. At Eric's apartment, Ethan learns about Sting. Eric tells him he's a venomous spider. He might be a killer, and Charlotte is keeping him as a pet. Eric suggests calling the Department of Health and Safety since Sting is quite big and venomous. Eric goes on and shows Ethan how big Sting is, freaking him out. Ethan confronts Charlotte about having a venomous spider for a pet. Mad, Charlotte rushes to Eric's apartment to get Sting back, but Eric ignores her. Charlotte tells Ethan off for having Eric keep Sting. She also tells Ethan his comic book sucks, as he killed off her favorite character, which was based on her father. Charlotte thinks her father is in Thailand and tells Ethan her father's way better than him. Ethan spills the beans and tells Charlotte her father's been back in town for 6 months and he never visited her. Hearing this, Charlotte is devastated and storms off to her room. Heather tells off Ethan for shaking Charlotte's view of her father and her confidence, reminding him it was never his call to tell Charlotte about that.
It's not my decision, I'm her dad!
Instead of giving Sting to the Department of Health and Safety, Eric decides to keep him and feed him bigger animals. For his selfish purposes, Eric wants to make Sting grow as big as he can. While Eric is deep asleep, Sting grows a lot bigger in size that he breaks out of the huge fish tank. Meanwhile, Ethan fixes the heater. He gets a voice message from Sandy from the publishing house. She tells him his comic book is not working out. This pisses off Ethan. He loses it and takes it out on the heater. Gunter comes in and berates Ethan for being clumsy. She promises to fire him first thing next month. Ethan asks her why she's being hateful to him. Gunter calls Ethan a weak man who walks off when the going gets tough. She also promises to do her best to keep him away from her niece. This leaves Ethan speechless and weighs heavily on him. Gunter goes back to her apartment. She tries calling her cat, but her cat is nowhere to be seen. As Gunter watches TV with her sister, she hears her cat's voice. Checking it out, Gunter finds the vent is open. Hearing her cat's voice from the vent, Gunter crawls inside, but her flashlight fails. Just then, Sting lunges at her and drags her inside. As time goes by, Ethan becomes more fed up with his life. As he fixes the TV cable, he gets a slight electricity shock. He snaps and hits the screen, scaring the children. Heather has Charlotte take her brother to the other room while she confronts Ethan about what has just happened. Charlotte puts her headphones on and watches some videos on her phone while Heather and Ethan are arguing. Just then, Sting attacks them, paralyzes them, and drags them away. Glued to her phone, Charlotte is unaware of what has just happened. Seeing Maria's dog barking, she thinks he's hungry and goes to the kitchen to get him some food. Totally unaware, Sting is dragging her stepfather to the vent. Still, the dog is barking. Charlotte checks out the apartment and freaks out when she finds her mom and stepdad aren't there. She checks the open vent to which Sting is dragging her stepdad. Not knowing what's going on, Charlotte tries reaching out for help, but there's no internet. Charlotte freaks out. She tries getting out of the apartment, but the windows and door are locked. The dog has also disappeared. Charlotte is scared when she recognizes this as Sting's doing and blocks the open vent to make sure he won't come in to take her as well. However, Sting sneaks from behind, takes her baby brother Liam, and escapes through the other vent. Charlotte screams at Sting, wanting her baby brother back. Charlotte starts regretting bringing Sting to her home. Having no choice but to fight Sting back, Charlotte puts on the moth sweater her grandmother made her, grabs her water gun, and loads it with mothball water. Moth is Sting's worst enemy. Charlotte goes to Eric's apartment hoping to get some help, but is shocked when she finds him tied to the ceiling with Sting's web. Charlotte then checks on her grandmother. She tries calling the police through the telephone, but there's no signal. Charlotte tells her grandmother to keep her moth shawl on to make sure Sting won't attack her. Finding more mothballs in Helga's apartment, Charlotte makes more moth water and wets herself with it before venturing out to find Sting. Ethan tries to break out of Sting's web, but he ends up burning his hand. Hearing Ethan's screams, Charlotte finally finds him and frees him from Sting's web. During that time, Frank the Exterminator arrives at Helga's call about the noise.
It's Frank, the Exterminator!
Just as Ethan is about to get out of the vent, he hears Liam's voice. Charlotte tells him not to rush it. Out of nowhere, Sting shows up to attack them. They end up falling into the dumpster in the basement. Charlotte briefly loses consciousness. She opens her eyes to find Sting towering over her, but Ethan saves her in time and scares Sting away with mothball water. Ethan checks on his stepdaughter, who breaks into tears, regretting having a venomous spider for a pet and realizing the lives her pet took. Ethan comforts her, tells her this is not her fault, and assures her they'll fight their way out of this. Just then, Sting throws Frank into the garbage room. Frank berates Charlotte for keeping that spider as a pet. Wanting to get out, Frank tries opening the back door, but it's locked. He attacks Ethan and asks him for the key, but all Ethan has is a bottle of mothball water to fend off Sting. Frank takes it and pours some of it on himself, but Ethan reminds him this is the only weapon they have against Sting. Frank takes out his nail gun and decides to fight Sting with it.
Let's kill this bitch.
Just as Sting breaks in through the vent, Frank screams in horror and shoots randomly. He fails to hit Sting and accidentally shoots the water sprinklers. The sprinklers are on, and the water washes off the mothball water the three poured on themselves, making them vulnerable to Sting's attacks. Just then, Sting shoots his web at Frank, pulls him to the vent, and blows his head off, traumatizing Ethan and Charlotte. The two retreat to the garbage compactor where they find Heather and Liam tied up with Sting's web. Ethan melts the web with the moth water they have left. Ethan hugs his wife and son, and Charlotte joins them, realizing how much she loves them. Sting appears and crawls towards the family. Ethan tries shutting the compactor door to crush him, but the door won't budge as it's not plugged in. Ethan tries reaching out for the plug, while Charlotte does her best to hold off Sting. Sting pushes Charlotte and is coming in to finish the whole family off. Just then, Ethan plugs in the compactor door in time, but gets electrocuted and loses consciousness. Charlotte pushes the button and closes the compactor door, crushing Sting in the process, thereby ending his threat. Heather drags Ethan out of the compactor and does her best to resuscitate him. Charlotte closes her eyes and counts to 3. 1, 2, and 3. Ethan is brought back to life. Charlotte calls Ethan Dad, tells him she loves him, and hugs him. Having survived this traumatic experience, the family shares a warm hug. Little does the family know, however, about the pile of spider eggs that has not yet hatched.